Uh, Professor V.S. Negi, who is going to speak next, he is presently working as the Professor of Medicine and Head of the Department of Clinical Immunology in the prestigious Institute of JIPMER, Pondicherry. Dr. Negi is actively engaged in advanced research in the areas of immunogenetics of autoimmune rheumatic disorders, gene and gene environment reactions, and response to therapies to these conditions. He also has many national and international research publications to his credit. He also has a postgraduate diploma in hospital and health management and has a broad understanding of health system management in India. He holds several honorary positions like Member of Medical Council of India, Inspector of DM in Immunology and Rheumatology, and he is also on editorial board of Indian Journal of Rheumatology. He has also arranged many national and international conferences, CMEs and workshops, including Indo-French CME on IVIG, which I incidentally attended long back in Pondicherry. And he arranges visits of international faculties to his institute. So over to Dr. Negi, please.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairpersons. First of all, I am thankful to Dr. Renuka and Dr. Chandrasekhar on the occasion of celebration of their 10th anniversary of starting the wonderful Chandra Clinic, through which they are providing patient care, teaching and training, and community services. I am also thankful to Dr. U.R.K. Rao, who has spoken in the morning so well about the basic aspects of the molecular therapeutics that I think my job has become much easier. I will be speaking on advancements in the management of SLE, things to come. So, to begin with, SLE, as we know, is a very complex and heterogeneous disorder with multi-organ involvement. Almost all the organs in the body can be involved. Treatment is with, again, immunomodulators and immunosuppressants. The only problem is the current therapies are limited by side effects. If you try to increase the dose of immunomodulators or immunosuppressive drugs, you get side effects in the form of infections, long-term incidence of cancers or other side effects. Nobody knows. There are studies where these concerns have been highlighted. So there is a need for newer selective therapies that may provide better control with fewer side effects. They are desperately, in fact, needed, and they are in the process of being developed. Coming to pathogenesis as was being discussed in the morning session, all autoimmune diseases, and for that purpose probably all the chronic diseases, especially for, let's say, autoimmune diseases, there is genetic susceptibility where the genetics, gender and environment plays a role. We are working on lots of immunogenetic aspects of SLE and rheumatoid arthritis, and we have found that our population, South Indian Tamil population, is slightly different than Caucasian population or even North Indian population. So the treatment responses in our population may be different, may not be up to expectations what has been published in literature. So first there is genetic susceptibility, then there is abnormal persistence of antigen or presentation of antigens due to some infectious event or some other event, and then once the antigens are presented, then the abnormal process starts. But at this particular time still the patient is in subclinical stage. Then you have, like Dr. Renuka said, beginning of autoantibody formation, and then the clinical phase, and the end result is the organ damage, and then unfortunately by that time nothing can be done. So there is a need for not only the again it was discussed in the morning, for novel biomarkers which can diagnose the disease early, and newer therapies which can treat these patients effectively without much side effects. Again, here the morning what has been discussed, the abnormal genetics leading on to abnormal presentation of antigens, B cells, T cells and dendritic cells talking to each other, leading on to abnormal immune responses in the form of autoantibodies, cytokines and various other molecules, leading on to organ system inflammation and damage. These are various pathways which through newer technologies, molecular technologies which have become available, are targeted to develop newer molecules, which Dr. U.R.K. Rao spoke in the morning. Some of them I'll be concentrating upon. Coming to major clinical manifestations, we also have a very large cohort of patients with SLE, around 500. This is data pertaining to around 300 patients. We found that the international frequency is Caucasian population, was almost the same, except the incidence of nephritis seems to be higher in our population, which has been well described. In fact, Dr. Malviya's study previously has described that these people our people have more severe disease in the form of CNS and renal involvement, but somehow we didn't have so much of CNS involvement. Probably we didn't take into account the milder forms of CNS involvement. So the nephritis is only thing which is probably different. Autoantibodies, we found that the ribosomal P, as Dr. Renka was saying in the morning, we have slightly higher incidence. Antinucleosome antibodies are lesser, and APLA, again, although the patients are not APS, antiphospholipid syndrome, but the incidence of antiphospholipid antibodies is still high, which is probably not as low as Caucasian population, but little lesser than the Middle East population, where the incidence of antiphospholipid syndrome is very high. So SLE traditionally has been classified as mild SLE or severe, moderate or severe SLE. Mild SLE is just probably involving the mucocutaneous joints without much organ system damage, and even if the organ systems are involved, they do not lead to residual damage. Whereas moderate to severe, any system, cardiac, pulmonary, hematological, gastrointestinal, renal, neurologic, skin, muscles, all these things can be involved and leading on to chronic damage, chronic inflammation and damage. Now coming to the treatment part, in SLE the thing is that for a long time there has been no drug which has been exclusively brought out for SLE except in 2011, where one monoclonal antibody has been produced for SLE. We are using the drugs which were used for other diseases, and they have been found to be useful. So in general measures, what probably has now been realized that cardiovascular risk management is important in these patients. Sun protection, dietary management, vitamin D supplementation, because vitamin D plays an important role in immunomodulation, prevention and treatment of osteoporosis, and another important area which probably we neglect in our setting is prevention of infections. In our country, still the main cause of mortality and morbidity in these patients is infection, because these patients have aberrant immune system which predisposes them to infection, as well as they are on immunosuppressive therapy, further predisposing them to infection. So vaccination is important aspects, and recent guidelines which are coming out now say that the patients have to be vaccinated against, these are all international guidelines, probably we'll have to modify them according to our own requirements, but people, because those people who are receiving high dose steroids, MMF, azathioprine, cyclophosphamide, or nowadays B-cell therapy is being used. So all of them, before initiating therapy, it will be better if they are vaccinated against all the routine vaccines. Plus, in India, the vaccination status of our population is, most of them probably would not have had vaccination or would have had a long time back. So they need to be vaccinated against routine infectious agents as well as against certain. But one thing has to be taken care of is that live attenuated vaccines, when the person is on immunosuppressive therapy, should be avoided. Coming on to management, the principles of management are for all the patients of SLE are the same, but the problem here is SLE is such a heterogeneous disease, each patient behaves differently. There are so many organ systems involved, there are so many varieties of inflammations going on. So each patient's management has to be tailored according to his organ system involvement. And again, the corticosteroids, antimalarials, having traditionally been used for milder forms of SLE, and immunosuppressive agents having used for organ threatening manifestations, as well as in some situations where the steroids cannot be tapered or stopped as steroid sparing agents. And nowadays, B cell therapy, targeted therapies are being put forward as treatment for refractory major organ involvement. Conventionally, steroids, hydroxychloroquine, methotrexate, cyclophosphamide, azathioprine have been used. Mycophenolate mofetil was the one which was introduced and has been used extensively in the last decade. Coming to corticosteroids, has been used both as topical, intralesional, oral in lower doses, and in higher doses as immunosuppressive dose in various conditions depending on the organ system involvement. Hydroxychloroquine, it's in last decade one more mechanism of action has been found, that it acts through inhibition of TLR signaling, not only through the acidification of the intracellular organelles. And the ACR 2012 guidelines say that all SLE patients with nephritis or otherwise also have to be treated with background of hydroxychloroquine unless it is contraindicated, because it is known to decrease the flare rates and keeps the patient in remission for a long period of time. And there have been some studies that in patients with antiphospholipid syndrome, if you give hydroxychloroquine, the titer of antiphospholipid antibodies decreases, and it decreases the chances of clotting or thrombosis. Methotrexate has been used as steroid sparing agent only in situations like articular joint conditions and the skin conditions. Dose is typically as used in rheumatoid arthritis. Then coming on to immunosuppressive agents, they are generally used for the life-threatening major organ involvement, and if there is a failure to respond to or inability to taper corticosteroids. Then in renal, if there is proliferative or membranous nephropathy, hematological, severe thrombocytopenia, TTP or autoimmune hemolytic anemia, neutropenias, lupus pneumonitis or alveolar hemorrhage, which is a very devastating condition and very high mortality despite all the measures which we take, myocarditis, pericarditis, abdominal vasculitis, and in central nervous system, transverse myelitis, cerebritis, all of these require immunosuppressive agents, except probably in cases of stroke, where the cause of stroke could be because of antiphospholipid antibodies. Coming to the anchor drug which has been stood the test of time, immunosuppressive drug, is cyclophosphamide. It is used for all the major organ involvement, but traditionally, classically has always been described in association with lupus nephritis. And for the initial studies, because in 1990s were from NIH, which is called as NIH protocol, and second one which came in 2002 is Eurolupus regimen. And these are the two regimens where NIH used cyclophosphamide in a higher dose, whereas Eurolupus used cyclophosphamide in a lower dose to reduce the time every 2 weeks, 500 milligrams every 2 weeks for 6 doses, followed by then azathioprine, whereas NIH protocol used cyclophosphamide. Initial NIH protocol used cyclophosphamide and continued it with cyclophosphamide every 3 months, but modified NIH protocol has now added azathioprine or mycophenolate mofetil. This is the maintenance thing. Then coming to the Eurolupus trial, which came in 2002, they found that there was no significant cumulative probability of treatment failure in patients taking a low dose IV cyclophosphamide regimen in those taking a high dose. So because high dose cyclophosphamide was always a concern for infections, for late malignancies, ovarian failures. So they found that the cumulative probability of achieving renal remission was similar, and number of renal flares also did not differ. So they said that the Eurolupus regimen is as good as NIH regimen. However, there were certain differences. Most patients who were enrolled in Eurolupus trial did not have clinically very severe disease, and very few blacks or African patients were there who are known to have very severe renal disease. And this is the situation, that is the same similar situation prevails in India, where most of our patients are very high grade class 4 or class 3 lupus nephritis. Then came the 10-year follow-up of Eurolupus nephritis data, and then it became a Eurolipus regimen, and probably many people started following it because they found that it was significantly, the results of the earlier study were continued further, and the low dose IV cyclophosphamide regimen followed by azathioprine was giving very good clinical results. So, however, in 2002 ACR guidelines, there is a difference. After 2010, people started giving Eurolipus trial. We have also given to many of our patients, and to be very frank, of 20 patients whom we treated with Eurolipus trial, 5 failed to achieve remission. 3 of them, after achieving remission, subsequently relapsed. So, we have gone back again to modify NIH protocol. Then came this ACR 2012 guidelines, and where they found that they have given their recommendation that for Caucasians, probably the low dose Eurolipus cyclophosphamide regimen is good. Second one, high dose cyclophosphamide, has not been tried in other populations, so they were very cautious in their approach, and they said that second regimen can also be given, and it has a level A evidence, whereas the through meta-analysis, whereas the earlier Eurolipus regimen, the newest latest one, there are no meta-analysis available as such. So, probably in our patients, Indian patients, those who have very severe lupus nephritis or very severe other organ system involvement, cyclophosphamide Eurolipus regimen probably is not superior to or probably inferior to the classical modified NIH protocol. This they have now given the protocol, induction with IV cyclophosphamide along with IV methylprednisolone or mycophenolate mofetil, and then maintenance with any one of these things. So, coming to then the latest entrant, not latest, many years back, has been used traditionally in transplant settings, but now is being used for, as the confidence grew, has been used for other immunological diseases, and lupus nephritis is one of them. It's a reversible inhibitor of inosine IMP dehydrogenase and selectively inhibits proliferation of B and T lymphocytes. So, it's a slightly better immunosuppressive as compared to cyclophosphamide, because it selectively inhibits B and T cells. It is therefore it is supposed to be less toxic and has been found to be less toxic, and there is no ovarian dysfunction, so probably better. The first study came in NEJM in 2000, where MMF was found to be effective in lupus nephritis, and it was said that it can be used both in induction and maintenance phases. Then came the ARMS trial, Espivara lupus management study, which has been published in 2009, and where they compared mycophenolate mofetil versus cyclophosphamide. So, they found that both of them were equal in initiating, making the patient go into remission. So, it was said that MMF is an alternative therapy to IV cyclophosphamide in induction of lupus nephritis. Then came the second phase of ARMS trial about the maintenance, how these patients do on maintenance therapy. So, second phase of it was a 36-month study of maintenance therapy with either mycophenolate mofetil or azathioprine, where it was conclusively proven that mycophenolate mofetil is superior to azathioprine in maintaining the renal response to treatment and in preventing relapse in lupus nephritis patients initially treated with either MMF or IV cyclophosphamide. So, again, coming to the latest guidelines of American College of Rheumatology, it recommends MMF 2 to 3 grams along with glucocorticoids. And however, because of lower body weight and body surface area, the Indians are not to be given more than 2 grams per day. I mean, Asians, the Asians are not to be given because of probably that increases the incidence of side effects. Coming to the drug, which is as old as cyclophosphamide, it's a prodrug metabolized to 6-MP, and reduces, it's again a non-specific inhibitor and reduces the number of circulating T and B cells and their functions also. And it's approved as a therapy, steroid sparing therapy in many other conditions apart from SLE. However, there were two RCTs which were conducted recently. One is ARMS trial and another was MAINTAIN trial. MAINTAIN trial was an earlier one which found no difference in the between MMF and azathioprine, whereas ARMS trial found that azathioprine was inferior to mycophenolate-mofetin. So, however, because the experience is still less, there are no meta-analysis available. So, the ACR has again 2012 guidelines say that either azathioprine 2 milligrams per kilogram per day or MMF 2 grams per day can be used as maintenance therapy for patients with SLE. These are the guidelines. Patient can be started either on MMF or cyclophosphamide. Cyclophosphamide either low dose or high dose. And to see whether the patient has improved or not. If the patient is improved, then switch over to MMF or azathioprine. If not improved, change from MMF to cyclophosphamide, from cyclophosphamide to MMF. And if the person fails both the therapies, then comes the new drugs, and the one which is available and which is being used nowadays is rituximab. This is for class 5 nephritis. Can use MMF with there are results available which say that type 5 nephritis, because responds very well to MMF. Could be because as taught classically that there is not much of immune activation going on. That may not be true, because most of these patients may have a combination of class 4 or class 5. So that response, and these people do respond well to MMF. Coming to next group of drugs, again used extensively in transplant settings, but now being used by rheumatologists, calcineurin inhibitors, cyclosporin and tacrolimus, and they have also been found to be quite useful in patients with SLE. However, personally speaking, I have not been very comfortable with using cyclosporin, neither in rheumatoid arthritis nor in SLE, because of lot of side effects which are associated. Although they may not be very severe, but patients are bothered by their side effects. And we did find that some of our patients developed hypertension. Some of them had progressive deterioration of renal functions. So, however, the results of the studies, they say that the cyclosporin can be used in patients with SLE nephritis, as well as other major organ system involvement. This is the cartoon showing the location at which the cyclosporin A and tacrolimus they act. They are calcineurin inhibitors. They inhibit T cell to decrease the secretion of IL-2, which is a very important molecule for perpetuation of inflammation in patients with SLE. So, ACR 12 guidelines say it can be used in refractory lupus nephritis, both as inducing agent and to maintain therapy, but it should not be the first line therapy in these patients. First line therapies, again, modified NIH protocol or mycophenolate-mofetil. These are all the results of various studies which have come in the last decade. Low dose cyclosporin alternative to cyclophosphamide for management of refractory lupus nephritis. Azathioprine, cyclosporin combined with steroids, equal efficacy. Cyclosporin and azathioprine are equal. Tacrolimus and prednisolone. Tacrolimus is another drug which is FKBP inhibitor, and they are as effective as IV cyclophosphamide, and being more selective to T cells, they are probably associated with less side effects and more acceptable safety profile. Coming to the newer drug, which is sirolimus, it's FKBP12 inhibitor, as well as mammalian target of rapamycin inhibitor. It's another pathway which inhibited. So it diminishes response to, not only decreases the IL-2 levels, but diminishes response to IL-2 also in both T and B cell activation. So it's supposed to be better than cyclosporin A or tacrolimus. And it has been found that in animal models that it is quite effective in patients who are lupus nephritis prone, a particular strain of mice. Human studies are going on, whereas a pilot study has shown that there is improvement in patients who take this treatment who are refractory to other forms of treatment. So some of these are some of the trials which are going on. Coming to newer therapies which have become available in last few years or which are going to come in near future or for which the clinical trials are going on, there has been virtually an explosion of therapies. B cell targeted therapies, inhibition of co-stimulation, cytokine directed therapies, these all Dr. Rao spoke in the morning, B and T cell tolerogens, innate immune system modulation, inhibition of cell signaling small molecules, he again described them very well. And then because there are some reports that SLE being a female predominant disease has something to do with female sex hormones. And there are reports that the females, there is a deficiency of female sex hormones in these patients. So people have tried to use DHEA, dihydroepiandrosterone, in these patients. And that will come to. And there are certain other approaches which are being used for other diseases which are being now translated into treatment of SLE. So again, same things, I'll be not taking much time. The newer therapies will be either B cell depletion, inhibition of B cell survival, then various pathways, cytokine pathways, other small molecular pathways that will be. So coming first to the B cell targeted therapies. In SLE, B cells are supposed to be overactive. They produce autoantibodies, and those autoantibodies are shown to be pathogenic in these patients. And B cells are not only producing autoantibodies, they are giving signals to T cells to get stimulated. They are also presenting antigens to T cells, so they act as antigen presenting cells also. So they have important role in immune system or immune homeostasis of the body. If something goes wrong, then it can go into either immunodeficiency or immunomalignancy or allergy. You never know how the immune system responds to certain external or internal challenges. So then coming to the approaches to control of B cells in SLE. So either B cells can be depleted, they can be inhibited through signals, or through co-stimulatory blockade or cytokine blockade. So we will be discussing some of these things in subsequent this thing. Various monoclonals which are either available or in the process of being tried are rituximab, ocrelizumab, epartuzumab, belimumab, and atacicept. Cept is, as Dr. Rao said, is not a monoclonal antibody. Rituximab is a chimeric monoclonal antibody, and it causes B cell depletion of from pre-B cell to B cell. It doesn't act on the stages before pre-B cell, and it doesn't act on the plasma cells. So the mechanism of action is either cytotoxicity through complement activation or ADCC induced apoptosis. The lymphoma, it's a standard drug now for all the lymphoma treatments, but it has also been because the immune system dysregulation happens in patients with lymphomas, and similarly in patients with SLE. So it has been tried in patients with autoimmune diseases, and rituximab has been found to be useful in some studies, whereas two recent RCTs, the Explorer trial and the Lunar trial, they failed to demonstrate efficacy of rituximab. Only reason, probably, we have also used rituximab in certain settings, but we have found that these patients do respond. But the reasons for failure of these drugs in these trials has been attributed to, because these patients were already on maximum doses of cyclophosphamide, they were receiving mycophenolate mofetil. So on top of that, if somebody is already on maximum immunosuppression, you try to give rituximab, the results probably are not going to be beneficial. So further trials are required before we say that rituximab is not effective in patients with systemic lupus erythematosus. So recent ACR guidelines say that rituximab cannot be considered first-line therapy for mild to moderate SLE. Still, in refractory SLE, it can be tried as a rescue regimen. These are the references for these things. So, the final recommendations of ACR is the patient has failed both cyclophosphamide and mycophenolate mofetil, then only rituximab should be tried, not as a routine thing. Second is another humanized, this is a completely humanized anti-CD20 monoclonal antibody, been tried in one trial called as BELONG trial, and it was found to be, there was some improvement, but the rate of opportunistic infections, of course, because the B cells, if they are depleted, that is going to lead to increase in infections. It led to very high incidence of opportunistic infections. So this trial was shelved, and I don't think this monoclonal antibody is going to come as a treatment option for SLE. Next is epratusumab, which is a recombinant anti-CD20 monoclonal antibody, and which also modulates B cell function. It has been found to be useful in patients with SLE, and maybe in near future it may, the trials are going on, and maybe in near future it will be on the list of drugs for treatment of probably the advanced refractory disease. Now is the important thing, because B cell, the immune system in patients with autoimmune diseases is in an overdrive through either persistence of antigen, or because of initial insult, the immune system learns to behave in one particular manner and goes into auto feedback loops, goes into overdrive. So the various growth factors called BLIS or BAF, they are important for B cell survival and maturation. If you somehow block them, then probably you can make the B cells come down to lower level of activity. So these are the things which have been tried, and one is a fusion protein, another one is a monoclonal antibody. Coming to belimumab, it's from 1955 onwards, there has been no drug which has been approved for treatment of lupus. It is the first drug which has been approved in March 2011 by US FDA for treatment of lupus. So this again at present is a rescue therapy for patients who have failed multiple drugs. Maybe when the experience grows, maybe it will become probably once we are sure about the side effect profile, long-term side effects and its efficacy, then maybe it can be brought down to first line or second line therapeutic group. There are 2 trials which are available. There is improvement in patients who are already on immunosuppressive therapy, so there is modest improvement. However, in these trials, the problem was that the patients were not severe lupus nephritis or severe CNS lupus, so we do not know what is the actual situation when it is actually brought into practice for treatment of severe disease, how it will behave. That is yet to be addressed. So next is atacicept, which is a recombinant fusion protein. Again, it mediates signals from both BLIS and APRIL, affecting both memory cells, plasma cells, and immunoglobulin production. And some trials have been conducted, and they had to be prematurely terminated because due to increased infection rate. Maybe they inhibited all the cells to such an extent that the body was not able to mount adequate immune response against the infectious agents. Another is briobacept. Again, it's a glycoprotein with BAF receptor linked to Fc domain. Again, it inhibits BAF but not APRIL. So it is supposed to be much better than atacicept. So trials are still going on. The results will be out after some time. Then coming to the thing, first, what happens in immune activation is the antigen comes through the antigen presenting cells, that is presented to T cells through either antigen presenting either dendritic cells or B cells to T cells. Then this is this thing called as co-stimulation, where once the antigen is presented, that itself does not trigger the events of signaling events. There is another molecule required, or a number of molecules required, called as co-stimulatory molecules. So they play an important role in activation of T cells and development of T cell dependent B cell responses. So these are CD40, CD40 ligand, CD28, CTLA4, CD28, CD80, 86. These are CD markers present on T cells and B cells, which people have tried to block by using certain monoclonal antibodies. So people have tried CD40 ligand blockade, CTLA4 immunoglobulin, what was discussed in the morning. One more molecule, ICOS B7 one blockade. Coming to CD40 ligand blockade, interaction between CD40 and CD40 ligand is crucial for second signal, what we call as, and two drugs, they have not been given names as yet, IDEC1310 and BG9588 have been tried, and the first one has not been found to be very efficacious. The second one has been found to be effective, but has led to certain unseen complications like embolic events. The reasons were not known, so the trial was terminated. The abatacept, the ones which is being available, is an alternate co-stimulatory molecule in SLE, CD28 and CTLA4. CTLA4 actually is a regulatory molecule. It decreases the signaling. So we are presently working on the genotypic variations of this CTLA4 gene. And as has been described in patients with rheumatoid arthritis, those who have a TNF genotype called as -308, those people have high levels of TNF, so they are more likely to respond to anti-TNF therapies, what we call as genetic biomarker. So similarly, we are trying to find out in this particular group, first is to find out what is the genotypic changes in these patients of in our population, and second, what is the association between this CTLA4 immunoglobulin with CTLA4 genotype. So maybe we'll be able to find something, or like in SLE we are working on 15 antigens and we have 15 genes, and we have found only 3 to be associated with SLE. All rest of the 12 in our population we didn't find any association. So we do not know as such what will be the results. So abatacept is a recombinant molecule consisting of extracellular domain of CTLA4 and a constant region of immunoglobulin. So it's something like half monoclonal antibody, and specifically blocks the interaction between CD28 and CD80-86. It antagonizes CD28 mediated T cell stimulation. So it is supposed to be better than rituximab. However, the first trial which was conducted was a failure. Second trial, because of serious adverse event, which was significantly more common, still nobody knows what the reason was. And then again, some of the in patients with severe lupus nephritis who have failed therapy with cyclophosphamide, now the trials are going on in combination with mycophenolate mofetil or IV cyclophosphamide in these patients. Inducible T cell co-stimulation is again another molecule, co-stimulatory molecule, and it has also been blocked and tried, and in animal models, and it did humans. The phase 1 studies have just started. Coming to the second one, once the T cell stimulation occurs, then is the release of cytokines by either T cells or B cells. Then the further downstream, so how to target them. So various cytokines, what we call as pro-inflammatory cytokines, TNF alpha, IL-1, IL-6, 10, interferon alpha and gamma are regulated in patients with SLE. Incidentally, IL-10 is not supposed to be a pro-inflammatory cytokine. It decreases the secretion of other pro-inflammatory cytokines, but it has also been found to be increased in patients with SLE, and has also been found to be associated with various clinical manifestations of SLE.
Dr. Noigi, I would request you to kindly cut short this thing. You're exceeding time.
Yes. So now the drugs which have been tried are anti-IL-1, what we call as anakinra, which is one IL-1 receptor antagonist, has been tried in patients with systemic onset JIA, has been found to be quite effective, but it is not found to be useful in SLE and is therefore not to be used. IL-6 is available as tocilizumab, and there are some reports that this may be helpful in patients with SLE, but results are yet to come. Another one is sirukumab, which is again monoclonal antibody against IL-6. Coming to IL-10, there have been not much progress in this particular front. Coming to anti-TNF alpha, because the anti-TNF therapy has been used in patients with rheumatoid arthritis, obviously everybody will think that it may be useful in patients with, most of the drugs are common, will be useful. However, drug-induced lupus triggered by infliximab is a well-known phenomena. So it should not be used in patients with SLE. Interferon in SLE, again interferon alpha is found to be associated with various autoantibodies in patients with SLE. So it may be worthwhile using these drugs. Cefalimumab, rontalimab are antibodies which are being tried. Anti-interferon gamma, some trials are going on. Now this is something which needs to be addressed a little bit. So B and T cell tolerance. What happens is when the antigens comes to the through the antigen presenting cells, if you make the cells tolerant to the antigen, or then nothing will go down further. So the immune response will be cut short at that particular level. So tolerogens have been developed keeping that in mind, and they are synthetic molecules that can bind and cross-link autoantibodies on reactive B cell surfaces, promoting B cell depletion or energy. So tolerogens could be either B cell specific, T cell specific, or even antigen presenting cell specific. So these are some of the tolerogens which have been in the making. Abetimus, and the phase 3 trials are going on and has not been found to be useful. Then is edratide, which is a T cell tolerogen, and again not found to be useful. And another one is being developed, mechanism of action is not known, is Lipitor. Coming to another arm, which is the innate system, because innate system and adaptive immune system are both interacting together to give rise to immune homeostasis or activation or aberrancy of the immune system. So if we block the complement pathway, because most of the effect in SLE can be explained through complement activation. So eculizumab is an anti-CD5 monoclonal antibody, has been developed, which is being tried, and then TLR249 have been implicated in patients with SLE, and the trials are going on. Small molecules I'll skip because Dr. Rao has already spoken about them. There are a large group of molecules available. GNS kinases, BTK, calcium column dependent kinases, Rho kinases, mammalian target of rapamycin inhibition. Only thing which I rapamycin is acts through mTOR, and another drug, a very commonly used drug, N-acetylcysteine, also seems to be acting through mTOR pathway. So it is yet to be seen, and studies have been conducted where N-acetylcysteine was found to be safe, and it was found to improve the disease activity. So probably in near future we will see some progress in this area. Then calcineurin inhibitors, some of them I have already discussed. One also drug known as dipyridamole, which was used previously quite commonly, has also been found to have effect on calcineurin and FAT inhibition. We do not know how practical it will be to take this into practice. So now coming to hormones, dehydroepiandrosterone has not been found to be useful in these patients. Coming to other approaches which have been used in the last few slides is IV immunoglobulin and stem cell therapy. Coming to hematopoietic stem cell therapy, the trials are going on. It is only considered to be a rescue therapy because it's the side effects are more. Although chances of going into remission are more, but the chances of death are also more, around 12% on what we call as day 100 mortality is around 12%. So it's not cannot be a routine therapy, but it can be a rescue therapy in patients with severe refractory organ system involvement. And those patients who respond, they respond very well. Some of them even can go on in total remission. Coming to IVIG,
Dr. Negi, we are really running short of time, so can you please...
Okay, IVIG is, has been tried in multiple immunological diseases, and we also had the opportunity to use this particular agent, and especially in CNS lupus, or what we call as malignant form of lupus, we have found this to be very, very useful. However, it has to be used with caution. Although the concern about nephropathy with sucrose containing IVIG, because I don't think any preparation available at present is containing sucrose. So controlled trials for in SLE are in progress, but it's a very costly therapy at present. So conclusion, SLE is is a complex immunopathogenic disease, difficult to develop a single drug targeting multiple immunopathological pathway. Each SLE patient may exhibit a distinct set of immune abnormality, what we call as lupus phenotype, and these development of these targeted therapies may allow individualized treatment regimens tailored to each patient's immune system. So probably each or set of patients will require separate drug kind of a thing. At present, one drug which has already been approved, belimumab, has shown some promise, and there are newer biologicals which are on the horizons, and I hope that many of them will come into practice. Therefore, the management of SLE in future perhaps may be more effective and less toxic. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Negi. We may permit a few questions from the audience.
The belimumab drug, which is recently, I think this is the more important thing, because we have many drugs for severe or life-threatening conditions in SLE, but this is the one which has shown promise in non-life-threatening, non-renal, but still troublesome yes. cases of SLE. So what do you think about
refractory cases of whether organ threatening or non-organ threatening? Probably if it is refractory to other therapies, yes, this is the drug at present. Maybe in near future, as you suggested, maybe it may come as first line or second line therapy for those patients, yes.
But I think the cost is quite prohibitive,
yes,
even to the West. Yes. So at this moment, probably we can't expect it.
I have one small question. So mycophenolate mofetil, is it specifically recommended only for arthritis, or could it be used in the other forms of lupus also?
The clinical trials are, because the SLE nephritis trials have been published, so the recommendations which I have given is for SLE nephritis, but I don't see any reason that it could not be used for other diseases, other manifestations.
I have a question. The vaccination which you have mentioned, the importance of vaccination, yes. Especially the physicians who are handling SLE cases, could you tell us the recommendation for various vaccinations and the timing as to when we should, before starting the immunosuppressive therapy, or we can give it along with the immunosuppressive therapy?
I think the vaccination guidelines usually are for nothing specific for SLE. I just extrapolated it to from other diseases. Like for rheumatoid arthritis, they have now put rheumatic other immunological diseases they have put. The basic understanding is that these diseases are having aberrant immune system, where they may be predisposed to infections as such, because they have limited or abnormal capacity to deal with infection. Second is they will be receiving immunosuppressive drugs, so they are at higher risk. Third is, in a country like India where infections are very common, it becomes all the more necessary. So patients who are yet to be started on immunosuppressive therapy can be given all the vaccinations, including live attenuated vaccinations, keeping a gap of 4 to 6 weeks, which is usually required for effective immune response to happen. The vaccines which require multiple doses, booster doses, probably can be given later on. That should not be a problem. But once the immunosuppressive doses are given, like let's say, for example, a the recommendations say that if prednisolone has been used for 15 milligrams for a period of 2 weeks at least, it is immunosuppressive. Whereas our experience is different, that's a different matter altogether. But those patients who are on immunosuppressive drugs should avoid taking live attenuated vaccines like varicella zoster vaccine, and other vaccines can be given safely to these patients and should be given.
Thank you, Dr. Negi, for such a comprehensive coverage of SLE.